Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this Green Recovery Festival session, which is a spotlight talk with Mike Barry. It's always great to hear from Mike. We love having Mike at the crowd. In this talk, he's going to be discussing the 2020 Sustainable Business Revolution, why it matters, and how sustainability can be successfully integrated into everything you do. So a nice practical session today for us. Chairing today is Amanda Powell-Smith, who is the Chief Executive at Forster Communications. So welcome, Amanda. Great to have you with us today as well. For those who don't know the crowd so well, we are a network for business leaders to explore and exchange ideas on corporate sustainability and responsible business issues. We're hosting this Green Recovery Festival. We've already had 1 week. Week one was last week. We're kicking off week 2 today. And we're lucky enough to have a great lineup again this week. Lots of panel discussions and interactive sessions on the cards. So do join us when you can. Also, a big thank you to our sponsors. So without you guys, the crowd wouldn't be here hosting these events. So Charities Aid Foundation, ADNAMS and the RIBA, thank you very much. And if you'd like to find out more about sponsorship of the crowd's events and our COP26 related activities for next year, please do get in touch with myself or one of my team. Okay, I think that's enough from me. So over to our chair for this session, who is Amanda Powell-Smith, Chief Executive of Forster Communications. Amanda works at the forefront of the sustainability movement, helping organisations to successfully combine commercial and social change agendas. An experienced leader with a background in strategic consultancy and reputation management, Amanda works with senior teams from organisations including KPMG, Allen & Overy, Neighbourly, Health Foundation and Nuffield Health to address complex communication challenges. So thanks, Amanda. Thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Hello, lovely to be here, and thanks for the introduction. In fact, my job mainly is to introduce the main act, and delighted that we're here to hear from Mike about a really critical topic at the moment around business revolution and what we can do. So Mike is absolute pioneer in this space. So as many of you will know, he has been a leader of green business, developing, launching and then implementing Marks and Spencer's groundbreaking sustainability plan, Plan A. And obviously, over 10 years, it delivered incredible value for the business, winning multiple awards. He's then gone on to help other businesses and is currently deeply involved in a range of sustainability things and activities through his current company, Mike Barry Co. Never better sort of insights, I think, for us all to learn from. Thanks so much, Mike, and over to you.
Amanda, thank you so much. And I'm just going to ping some slides up now that we can follow through, and then we'll get started. And look, guys, delighted to be with you today. I've been kicking around this space 20, 25 years now. Learned a lot, seen a lot, not got everything right. And the next 20 minutes or so is just a download of where I think we are as society, economy, corporate life, and the very real excitement I want you all to have about what lies ahead. And what lies ahead is not easy, it's difficult. We see the politics we've got around us at this moment in time. We see COVID, we see austerity looming, but I'm really excited about what we can do as a sustainable business community in the next few years. So I'm going to share some very practical lessons of what I've seen, what I'm seeing. I do ask you to ask questions. Please do. This is not about Mike turning up with one truth that you all need to walk away and do what Mike says. Absolutely not. This is about literally what the crowd is about, sharing together, we co-create together. So the more questions, the more challenge, the more provocations, the more examples we get, the better we all win. So let me sort of start at the beginning. 19 years at Marks and Spencer, working with a simply brilliant team. From Sir Stuart Rose, the inspiring chief exec who launched it, Mark Bolland, chief exec who took it on from Stuart, and now Steve Rowe leading the business going forward. I was always surrounded from the very top to the shop floor by people who cared passionately about doing the right thing the right way. What Plan A did, it brought structure, it brought governance, it brought transparency to all that passion and energy within the business, particularly one that was going through an awful lot of challenge, an awful lot of change in the commercial marketplace. But Plan A fundamentally helped M&S move forward, not just in terms of becoming more sustainable, but in shifting the culture of the business as well, helping it to be bolder and braver, and the way that it used to be in the 20th century, where it really defined global retail. helping it to look outwards rather than be insular, and helping it join the dots between the many different silos that made the business into one moving whole. It helped enormously with that cultural shift of the organisation. So I'm going to offer a few slides now. So we'll take about 20 minutes. I want you to be thinking about the questions all the way through. Now, point number one is the biggest point and the most important one. We have a window of opportunity. COVID has been the most disruptive year that we've had, isn't it, 2020? We've seen nothing like it. And yet creeping up all around COVID was the sense that capitalism or globalization 1.0 that we'd been living from 1980 to 2020 was coming to an end. We'd never truly recovered from the financial crisis of 2008, a sense that financiers could run the economy and society into the sand and not pay any real consequence for doing that. A sense that we rushed back to rebuild a flawed system that worked for a few but not for the many. A climate crisis, a biodiversity, a plastics crisis, everything all the way around us. There was a sense, a seething sense that all was not right. But there's never a reason to stop it and reset. And I think what COVID has done is finally made us lift our eyes and think, this is not the system we want. This is not an economy that serves society or the planet in the way that it should. So in the next 1, 2, 3 years, in a very flawed way, we have an opportunity to build a tremendously different economy. One that I think many people on this call would want, seize it. We must seize it. And let me explain how. I want to pick out 6 big themes to start with. The first one, and I'm speaking now as a 53-year-old fella, 3 teenage kids, intergenerational equity is the true battleground of the next 10 years. My generation, and I stress mine, probably not most people on this call, has never had it so easy. We've got the pension, we've had a job for life, you've got the housing market, you've seen the economy grow and grow and grow without any worry about environmental or social consequence. You know what? We've had it easy. Now, I say that advisedly because I know there are significant sections of society that haven't. So I'm saying that in quite a broad sense. But compared to the baton we passed to our children, it's been easy. What do our children get? A climate crisis, a biodiversity crisis, a huge debt that they've taken on behalf of the older generation to protect us through COVID. Tough to get on the housing ladder, tough to have any kind of pension security of the future, a gig economy, career uncertainty in the way that we never had. So we have to understand that business stands potentially as a bridge between those two worlds or a way of perpetuating that problem. The second thing I would say, I'm seeing lots of environmental ambition in the last 6 months, particularly in the run-up to a year from COP26. Great, I'm loving that ambition. We'll talk about some of that in a moment. But I'm not seeing any social ambition for business. Where the big commitments on the living wage about protecting people's data, protecting people's well-being, physical and mental, the commitment to continual education, the commitment to communities facing huge challenge, particularly as we, shopping shops, for example, leave high streets, migrate online. So when I see environmental ambition, I want to see social ambition with it as well. The third thing I'm seeing is a real change from this atomized economy that we built. There's a specialist retailer with a specialist factory behind them, a specialist farmer, a specialist raw material provider. They never knew who each other were. They never spoke with each other. They all did their atomized little specialism. And as COVID has shown us, we're all joined up. Environmentally, we're all joined up. I mean, the government's National Risk Register 2017, the last one they did, told us the number one risk to British society and the economy was a pandemic. Yet what happened? No business leader did anything, no political leader did anything. When it happens, we all stand around looking aghast, running around, trying to come up with solutions. We need to understand we're all joined up. The fourth thing I want to stress is the potential for tech for good. Now, I'm a great believer we're at crossroads with tech. Tech used badly, as we've seen with potential hacking of elections, as we've seen with the spread of disinformation, of hate online, it can be used in a tremendously bad way. But it can solve an awful lot of the challenges we're about to gallop through in a moment as well. Using technology for good and getting technology a good name is a powerful opportunity in the next few years. We're going to see a profound change in how we make things in the future. Again, whether it's vertical farms, whether it's electric cars, whether it's drones, whether it's satellite sensors, the ability to do things differently, again, tremendous. And finally, we all need to commit to be part of a movement to build back better, both as individuals and as corporations, as governments, as civil society as well. Now, what we're seeing is a real visibility of the issues that many of us have seen for the last 20 years. We've read the reports, we've done the studies, we've sat down in group meetings and discussed them, but nothing's really changed. And now what we're seeing with, I think Globescan did a great study this summer, spoke to 27,000 people around the world, 20 odd different countries. And they found that almost universally, 80–90% of most populations were saying there is a climate crisis, something needs to happen. But when people were challenged and said, but is it more important than COVID? People in the developed world, our world that was not seeing too many of the issues yet, said, well, not really. COVID feels more existential to us. If you're living in the developing world, in India or Africa or Central America, dealing with drought and extreme rainfall, wildfires, you're turning around and starting to say, this is real and I want action now. Now, what we're starting to see in the last 12, 18, 24 months is there's impacts on the developing world creeping into the richer countries. Again, California wildfires, Australian wildfires. We've seen extreme flooding and dryness in Europe. People are starting to question which direction we're going. The visibility of plastics population, and of course, the march for social justice on the streets. However much you want to put your head in the sand, there's a sense that the world needs to change. Now, of all the slides I'm going to show you now, this is the oldest. I've used this for a decade. I've spoken about where I think citizens are at. And I keep retesting it against every single piece of research that comes out about how do citizens think about social and environmental issues. And it's incredibly simplistic, but it's still these four things. 10% of people, probably many of you on this call, passionately and deeply green, increasingly rejecting mainstream consumption, the flights, all the holidays, all the cars, chasing all the fashion, and living a simple life. But not just living a simple life on your own, but getting out there on the street and campaigning for change. A second group, light greens, 35%, who want to keep on consuming, enjoying the good life as they remember it from the past. But they want to do it in a much less impactful way. An electric car rather than a diesel car, plant-based diet on the meal out rather than meat-based. Something, a piece of clothing that they can cherish, repair, rent, feel excited, resell, rather than buy it once from fast fashion, throw it away. So this group is changing as well. Another group, again, of 35%, who are tremendously concerned about the future. And I'm not going to talk too much politics, but you can see the world of Trump and Brexit in this world. This is a group of people who've been left behind by globalization, picking up the pieces of their jobs being outsourced for corporate profit to other sides of the world, which has been good for these other countries, but left many communities in middle France, middle UK, middle of the USA, broken and left behind. And what they're saying is we want cleaner air, we want cleaner rivers, we want green spaces to use, but we want them here where we live. And this is where the whole discussion about a just transition is so very important. And then 20% of people, sadly, there's a few climate deniers out there. We've seen them come out last week as we announced that we're getting out of diesel and petrol cars, as we'll discuss in a moment. But the vast majority of this group, too poor to be engaged because they're just struggling to get by week to week. And we've got to respect that. But there's still 80% of people who want to be engaged in some shape or form in significant change. Now, what we've seen, again, in the last 12 months, even in the middle of COVID, the political system has started to move in the right direction. Again, Boris Johnson's 10-point plan came out last week. Again, I've followed all the coverage of this on Twitter and social media. Glass half full, glass half empty. I'm a perennial optimist. I see a huge opportunity in what's going on. I think it's the right list. I could quibble about the speed of some of the things, but it's the right list of things to do. My big challenge for our political masters is actually deliver it. Where we've done delivery, offshore wind in the UK, we've seen significant benefits of prices coming down, green electricity coming our way. It's been brilliant because we've had a long-term approach and policy. We've delivered it. We need to do the same for these 10 points as well. Biden should be a huge boon for climate action, not just in the States, but across the world as well. But my word of caution is Biden's got an awful lot of his hands. He's got a fractured, splintered country. He's got a Senate they're going to be very, very difficult to work with. Please don't put too much pressure on the fella to solve all the world's ills. But on balance, we go into 2021 in a much better place politically across the ocean in terms of what can be done. And of course, COP26, but not just COP26 in 2021. We've got COP15 on biodiversity. We've got the Food Systems Summit as well. These three big moments in time, we not just need to use, but business needs to step forward and be part of the solution and the answer of them. The investor world. Now, I spent 20 years bemoaning the fact that most investors, with a few honourable exceptions, cared not a jot about this space. I talked about 2008 financial crisis, and none of them paid the price for what they'd sort of left upon society. What we've seen again in the last 12 months is a welcome interest or rise in interest across investors. I'll just shorthand it as ESG. I know it's more than that. There's impact at one end through to a much simpler and lighter ESG at the other, but I'll just call it ESG for simplicity. I'm not going to read through all these bullet points. You can read, you would recognise these things yourself. A couple I would pick out, really important to me: carbon markets. When we get a proper price on carbon, we'll see capitalism reach its potential on decarbonisation efficiently and effectively. We keep messing around with the price on carbon. We need to work decisively on it. The second thing is transparency. I grew up in a very transparent industrial sector when it came to sustainability. Retailers were always being compared with each other. M&S and Tesco's, Waitrose and the Co-op, Sainsbury's and Morrison's. Good businesses didn't always get it right, but you always knew that somebody was keeping an eye on you. Finance, no, invisible. 99% of people on the street could not name more than the big four banks in Britain, let alone all the mosques of the universe that lie behind them. Now, thanks to the good work of people like Share Action, looking at 75 of the world's biggest asset owners, we can start to get a pecking order of the good, or shall we say the goodish, the distinctly middling, and the very, very poor as well. And again, look at how they've benchmarked these 75 asset owners. Over 50% of them get a D or an E. They need to improve. And now it's in the public eye, they will. The other point about this page is the alphabet soup of initiatives that's starting to emerge. It's confusing, both for the financial community and for the corporate community as well. Which of these many, many different standards do I follow? We need to simplify and simplify fast. But the overall good news is investors moving in the right direction. And then just to pick on this point, transparency, because along with the price on carbon, I believe transparency is what drives the change that we need, along with policy as well. Again, these are just a couple of examples from the world of plastics and retail and from the world of food and animal wealth, but there are many, many more. The more we get from organisations like the World Benchmarking Alliance, the better. Because we can start not just to judge the voluntary leaders, the Unilevers, etc., that put their hands up and lead on their own. Everybody, even if they're skulking at the back of the stage trying to stay out of it, has a mark assigned to them and is held to account for it. So having challenged the world of alphabet soup, it's great to see a smaller number of approaches rise to the surface. I think science-based targets have done a brilliant job coming into the wild west of corporate carbon claims and saying, nope, there's a standard way that needs to be signed off, and then you need to be held to account for delivery of it. 1,000 companies now signed up to an SBT. I would say for any large company now, if you haven't got an SBT in 12 months' time, you really want to be looking at yourself in the mirror. And others should be looking at you and saying, why? You must get an SBT. I mentioned the World Benchmarking Alliance, again, starting to point the spotlight of transparency against every participant in the sector. And of course, TCFD is going to become more and more important in terms of businesses disclosing their climate risks and the materiality of them, not just to the environment, but to the economic bottom line and to society as well. So the next great trend I'm seeing is partnerships, because again, I saw at M&S trying to change the world system that you participate on your own is devastatingly difficult. Little old M&S sold several hundred different food lines with palm oil in them, containing just a few thousand tons of palm oil. Dreadful problems are back at the end of those supply chains. You want to change it. Try and do that with a liquid commodity 7 stages removed from you with a tiny buying power. Ain't going to happen. M&S had to stand with Sainsbury's and Tesco's and Walmart and Waitrose and Coke and Pepsi to drive change. Partnerships are key. I mentioned just here Climate Action 100 Plus, again, bring investors together to challenge the 161 biggest carbon polluting corporates on the planet to get that science-based target and set net zero goals. World Green Business Council, also the UK Green Business Council, again, bringing together the built environment to drive tangible change. And something that happened just the other week, the British Retail Consortium, even at the height of the pandemic, brought 63 of its retail members together to commit to become net zero, not just for scope 1 and 2, lorries, offices, warehouses and shops, but scope 3, that all-important scope 3, where businesses have this huge footprint. 90% of the carbon footprint of a retailer is in its supply chain, thousands of factories, farms and fields and forests and fisheries, and the consumer's home. Millions and millions and millions of people using things in different ways, wasting food, recycling or not. Again, the BRC has boldly said 2040, scope 1, 2, and 3 net zero. That will be tough. It will only deliver it by working together. So all of this has put the sustainable business, taking it off the pages that we as an audience would read all the time. You know, the EDs, the business screens, the ethical corporations, events like the Crowd host, into the Economist, the Financial Times, and Time magazine. Brilliant. That's where it should be. We need it to be read at the very highest echelons of business leadership. Now, let me just pull out a few examples of businesses I see do some interesting thing. And this is not an endorsement of any of them, because like Marks and Spencer, at best, no incumbent big business is more than 20% sustainable today. But here's some interesting things. Amazon has now found a point on its website for 40,000 different products. They've got an independent certification, fair trade, organic, etc. Easier to find them in one place rather than spreading them across a website that might contain up to 12 million different product lines. Microsoft, not just putting its own house in order and taking responsibility for its historical carbon emissions, but using its prowess with big data and AI to create a planetary computer to solve the world's challenges and to solve it for their clients as well, starting to work with their big corporate clients to drive net zero together. And that's something that Amazon's doing as well. And I think this is a really interesting trend. And this is just Mike speculating, no more than that. Amazon's set its own climate pledge, and it's demanding to a degree that the big corporate brands that want to sell on its platform need to set net zero goals and work with Amazon to deliver them. Good, because I could see an endpoint in a few years' time when if you don't have a net zero goal and a science-based target, you ain't selling in Amazon, probably not selling in Walmart, probably not selling in Tesco's. That's a huge kick up the backside. I put DSM and Croda here. Dutch State Mines has now reinvented itself as DSM, one of the most advanced food, nutrition, and animal feed businesses in the world. And Croda, the chemical company, they've put the Sustainable Development Goals absolutely at the heart of their commercial strategy and their conversation with their investors. Look at both of them for how they enunciate that business case for a sustainable future leading to better outcomes commercially. BT, love what their pension fund's done, net zero 2035. Again, it drives this transparency, a requirement for all the companies that pension funds invest in to change along with it. Same with NatWest Group, again, bringing transparency to its Scope 3 footprint and committing to halve it as well by 2030. Dentsu set its own net zero goal, one of the world's biggest advertising agencies, but committing to work with its clients, the big businesses that advertise with it, to drive sustainable change as well. Foothills for them, but absolutely would drive the change. Same with WSP, the big civil engineering company, again, committing by 2030 that all the projects they put in front of their clients to bid for work have to have at least 50% less embedded carbon than the ones of today. That's everything they pitch for. Tesco's committing to a 300% increase in plant-based sales. Unilever's just made a similar commitment to 500% increase by 2027. And Unilever taking 1 million tons of oil out of being used as a raw material every year in their home care business, replacing it with less impactful alternatives. Again, a €1 billion R&D investment to get there. That's just a smattering of the change that we're starting to see. It's coming, it's big, and it's bold. Now, having said all that, I'm really excited about what these incumbent businesses are doing. It's the world I come from. Let's be clear that in 2 or 3 years' time, if you're still doing a little bit of incumbency that's a little less bad than the past, you're dead. Because look at reports now like Rethink X postulating that 50% of the US beef industry will be wiped out next decade, not by plant-based diet, but by laboratory fermented protein alternatives to meat. Partly because they're better for the planet and clearly better for animals, but mainly because they're going to be better quality and cheaper for the customer. Electric vehicles, again, you can see the rapid shift that's happening. All those car boardrooms that 3 years ago were sniggering at the thought of electric ever overtaking diesel and petrol, egg on the face, desperate trying to keep up with Tesla, half of them will be around in 10 years' time. 2019, the resale report from ThreadUp as well, talking about the shift to the resale of clothing, rather than people just buying it once, wearing it once, being seen on Instagram and chuck it away. Resell and resell and resell. Huge high fixed cost in day-to-day fast fashion. As soon as you lose 10, 15, 20% of your sales to these resale platforms, you get a bust. So what we're seeing is a new economy form around us. Again, a smattering of names up here. It's not to say that these are the only guys out there. Clearly, there are many. But many of these businesses, Tesla's a great example now, valued at $400 billion, might be a little bit speculative, but it's still valued way more than any other car company on the planet because it owns the future. not just in terms of electrification, but autonomous vehicles and data as well. Indigo Ag started to create a marketplace in helping farmers lock up carbon, not just buy meat from them, buy carbon credits from them. Allbirds wearing them right now. Beautiful, comfortable shoe. My kids told me they're reasonably aspirational for an old fella to be wearing. You know what? More sustainable shoe I could be wearing as well. Aerofarms, vertical farms, impossible plant-based diet. Modern Bedo, cloning leather in the laboratory with a lot less impacts than conventional leather. All around us, the alternative to today's unsustainable incumbents is there. So let me finish now with just 9 pieces of learning, right? 9 specific pieces of learning about what do you do about all these trends? And I just frame them around the why, the what, the how. Why do I need to become more sustainable? Using the insight from the outside world, not just literally listening to my customer, because if I'd literally listened to my customer in the old Henry Fordism, I'd have just given them a faster horse. Customers are saying, I want greener products. I just don't want to pay more for them. And why should they? If I'm flocking your products that have destroyed the planet and people on the way to get it to the customer, that's my problem to put right as the corporate, not the customers. The product for the customers, we've seen things like Tesla, has to be better, aspirational, more affordable, more exciting than the conventional one. That's what we're selling. Strategy, I've talked about disruption. This is not about risk and reputation. The Greenpeace and the Guardian might beat you up for getting one thing wrong one day and then everything disappears. This is fundamentally about embracing sustainability as the product and service you put on the marketplace. Not in 10 years' time, in the next 1, 2, 3 years' time. And leadership, making sure that your individual leaders that lead your company are as comfortable, as confident, as articulate as you, actually explaining internally and externally to customers, investors, why sustainability is at the core of what you do. The what do I commit to do to become sustainable? Those bold targets, again, that's a given now. I mean, back when Plan A was launched in 2007, 100 detailed time-bound targets was revolutionary. 8 now, or it shouldn't be. Now it's about adopting things that people recognize and respect, science-based targets. Governance, again, this still stands out from the Plan A days. An internal governance machine that delivers change. Again, I always pay homage to my good friend Adam Ellman, Carmel McQuaid, Louise Nichols at M&S, who built a system to make sure those 100 things got done. And I still suspect in government and too many businesses, the press release goes out there, these are things we want to do, job done. It's the beginning. Building a team that can deliver change is critical. And again, the reporting, again, this should be really obvious now. But the M&S system, we learned not just having a report, but an independently audited report was critical, that talked about what we'd achieved, but also the warts as well, what went wrong and what we're going to do about them. And the final bit, I would say I would give most businesses an amber at the why, sort of semi-good at strategy, usually a greenish on the what, not bad on the targets. A flashing red, useless on how do I integrate sustainability into my organization. This is the EQ bit, the emotional bit. Why should an employee, a customer, a shareholder, a business partner, somebody else in your sector come with you and deliver sustainability with you? Show people the benefits of change. Make it easy for your suppliers. And most of the reasons that supply chains are unsustainable is because you, the buyer, make it so. And how do you build partnerships across your sector? I mentioned the British Retail Consortium. I could have talked about the Consumer Goods Forum, bringing your sector together, your biggest competitors, to drive the change you collectively need. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what I think is going on right now. I started off by saying, be excited, be so excited about what we can achieve in the next decade together. And my final point to all of you as individuals leading change in big companies, small companies, start of your career, end of your career, doesn't matter. Emotional intelligence, lead people, inspire them. Know how business works. You can't change it unless you understand it. Show them you can build partnerships, bring all these different insights together into the boardroom so people understand them. Have a bold goal for 2030, but practical steps to get there. And above all, be resilient, be bold, be brave, keep going. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. And absolutely so much packed into there, but also, so much optimism and I know excitement about next year as well. There's already lots of questions that have come in. So I'm going to actually kick off with one from someone that sent through just to sort of frame it. Does responsible business mean different things to consumer-facing businesses versus B2B businesses? It'd be great if you could just have a bit of an expand on that.
Yeah, great question. And the obvious answer is yes, but less. So as I grew up in the 10, 15, 20 years ago, the fact that a Marks and Spencer, a Coca-Cola, or a Tesco's very visible brands were expected to do things absolutely. The vast majority of the economy visible to the public eye, less so. What you're starting to see now is though the Tesco's, the Walmarts, the Amazons that I mentioned, turning around and said, we can't become sustainable. We can't deliver our goals unless our B2B supply chain does as well. So again, we didn't mention Walmart's Project Teraton. Walmart has turned around to 50,000 suppliers in the world. So we're taking 1 billion tons of carbon a year out of our collective supply chain. If you're not willing to participate and do that, you ain't going to be part of our supply chain. So I think you're going to see far more pressure now placed upon B2B companies, whether it's the BT pension fund, Walmart and its requirements for its suppliers. I mentioned Amazon as well and its climate pledge. You have got to be part of this change. And of course, the biggest part of all of this is that this is now enshrined in law. Net zero 2050. This is no longer Marks and Spencer and Unilever voluntarily saying, yep, we'll go ahead even though no one's asked us to. Steadily, the policies and the regulations will come in that drive every participant in the economy, visible or invisible, to change, get ahead of the curve.
It's really interesting, isn't it, the supply chain point? And I just wondered that almost that balance between push and pull in terms of the opportunities that are out there. With obviously the UK government's announced its intentions to push forward social contract and social value act. Are you seeing any other businesses who are doing much more deliberate selecting now as almost an incentive rather than a stick side? How do you think that's going to evolve?
So I think we're right at the very beginning. So most big buyers from supply chains now have basic standards in there. Human rights, environment, animal welfare, basically about avoiding doing tremendous harm. Okay. And and let's be clear, not enough big businesses have those, and not enough big businesses police them. Every day we still find problems in supply chains that we shouldn't. But if BT is going to have a net zero pension fund by 2035, if Amazon's going to be net zero by 2040, if the British Retail Consortium is going to be net zero by 2040, its supply is going to have to do more than just comply with the most basic environmental and social requirements. These requirements are just 19 years out. We have to drive change. And the one thing all of us forget, and I've been very polite about this, but I'm going to put it into the mix now. We can all be a little bit proud about what's happened in the last 12 months, because we have seen a shift on. I talked about the Prime Minister's 10-point plan that we saw last week. But if you look what the climate and ecological emergency bill is saying, that's just the beginning. We need to go beyond that in terms of committing not to a 3 or 4 degree world that we're heading for now, but to a 1.5 degree world. We need this intergenerational equity. We need social justice that said, of course, the UK has profited more from a fossil fueled economy than most other parts of the world. We probably need to do more to rectify the problem as well. We need to recognise our consumption-based footprint that happens on the other side of the world as much as the footprint that happens here. So again, as much as this is my half-empty part, we need not to be complacent. We need to push on from where we are.
And that's a nice lead into a question I've got actually here around what do you think the future is for consumption orientated retail sector, particularly fashion, which is focused on growth, and that means more consumption. And how can companies like M&S start to challenge that growth mindset so that we all buy less, but there's still a thriving economy?
Yeah. So look, I won't put words in the mouths of my M&S friends. That's for them to answer. But let me offer a general thought. The first great disruption the economy saw in sustainability was electricity, certainly Western marketplaces. And we've seen the rapid decarbonisation. I'll just use the UK as an example of the UK electricity system. To all of us, 67 million people in the UK, nothing's changed. The electrons still flow, the laptop's on, the light's on, what's changed? Nothing. The next great disruption, electrification of the car system, that's a bit different because we're all going to have to charge something in a different way rather than fuel it. But I still own a car, I can still get around, I can still sit in a traffic jam with a piece of metal. The next wave of disruption requires me actually to consume differently, less volume of stuff. And I use this number now not to criticize any one particular company, this is just illustrative of the scale of consumption on the planet. Coca-Cola serves 700 billion servings of Coca-Cola drinks a year around the world. That's one company. So when you add it up across the amount of stuff that we consume, and you could say a lot of it's necessary, it's trillions of items. And every item, even if it's produced 5% or 10% more efficiently than it was 10 years ago, which is what most businesses have been aiming to do, we're still overwhelmed by the fact that we're consuming too much, and we've still got a couple of billion more people to squeeze onto the planet. So consumption has to be at the heart of it. And any business model at the moment is about flogging more single units of stuff, whether it's flights, whether it's clothing, whether it's technology. There's going to be a point at which you come to a juddering halt. And the scary thing for businesses, you keep thinking consumers don't get this. They keep saying they want business to change, but they don't actually change what they're buying until they do. And suddenly, too late, and you're replaced. So I would say that anybody, particularly the food industry right now, and again, I point my finger at the meat industry, which I think can do tremendous good, but just not in its current guise. The meat industry in particular needs to change rapidly to demonstrate that it can be positive for planet and people. Otherwise, the plant-based and the synthetic laboratory-grown alternatives will just displace it.
Do you think it's interesting that food was missed off the list of 10 things that the government launched this week, when it's possibly one of the biggest things that we can impact? Is that...
Well, so it could have been there in 2 or 3 different ways. One is land use. So we talked about planting 30,000 hectares of trees. I sort of understand why it's very easy for somebody in PR to say, let's talk about trees. Much more importantly, we've got a new environmental land management system replacing CAP as we've come out, we've Brexited as a nation. We have to find a new way of subsidising farmers. And we could do it in the old way of just paying them for the amount of land that they own, or a much more productive way about the social environmental good that they bring. Now, the signals have certainly initially been positive about elms and where it might end up in embedding carbon management in there. We'll see where we end up, at a time of great stress and strain on the exchequer, but let's hope it's positive. Creating marketplace for farmers to pay them to lock up carbon, I mentioned very briefly. Paying farmers to produce meat in a very, very different way than the current one are all opportunities. And of course, you then got the 2 great issues to do with, or 3 great issues then beyond that to do with in foods. Deforestation. So the government's had the Global Resource Initiative, the GRI, that's brought civil society, big business and government together to co-create a system to eradicate deforestation from UK global supply chains that I mentioned a moment ago. Palm oil and soy, no one's going to solve it on their own, but bringing due diligence and transparency to the marketplace. So Tesco's, M&S and the others have to stand up and say, this is what we're doing, critical. Cutting food waste, and again, I'd salute the friends at Tesco's for the great work that they've done to tackle and reduce food waste, not just in their own operations, but also back in their supply chain and helping their customers reduce food waste. I mentioned the Olio app on the slides that I use as one of the tools of doing that. And then you've also got plastics, and a huge need for us to build a circular economy, a simple way, because I think plastics have got an important part in the future, just not in this current profligate use now, which leaks out that any useful system, only 8% of the world's plastics getting reused. We have to build a plastics truly circular economy quickly. All of those could have been covered.
Yeah, really interesting. Wait, I just wanted to roll back something you had in one of your slides earlier around social ambition and the need to really match that to a sense of environmental ambition and this sense of just transition, which is a phrase that's starting to come out more. And I wondered, is there any examples if you're seeing who's doing that well, or where that connection point of the transition is coming together?
And of course there are good examples, but I made the point right at the start of my presentation that environmentally, I'm seeing lots of big ambition. Net zero, 100% sustainable raw materials, 100% circular. There's still got to be delivered, but somebody's writing the ambition down and saying we're going to do it. Social commitment, what do I see? Don't have kids in factories, don't kill somebody in a building site, don't poison somebody with your food. In essence, is what it is across great swathes of the economy. Now, I do see some really good stuff about living wage. I see some really good stuff about B Corporation. I see some really good thinking about well-being, whether it's diet or mental well-being. But I don't see it codified. Now, my slight sympathy for business here is that unlike the environment, we can't boil it down to a science-based target for people. But I would say to me, and this is Mike speaking now, there's a couple of basic principles out there. Pay your bloody taxes. You and I do. Any business now that is not paying its fair share of taxes to support health services that's kept us all alive in the last 6 months, what are you about? So I think taxes, I think wages, I think living wage, again, it's got to be carefully thought through. It's not an immediate sticking plaster in an economy where 5 million people don't currently get it. And what does it mean for relatively low paid jobs at a time of austerity? But come on, we can move towards it more quickly than that. And I think the whole space of data, privacy. We're handing all this precious information across the business. We've got GDPR now in Europe. It's guarding it a little bit better, but really I'm looking for big businesses to start to differentiate themselves above and beyond just selling your data off to the Ukrainians when they get a chance. You need to be showing me that you really care about my privacy, the data I'm handing to you now and forever. And they're just three things I'd really like to see some progress on. And again, you mentioned earlier the importance of B Corp. This concept of having a new way of defining how you generate wealth and you share wealth, I think is critically important as well. And again, you can start to see some of the big brands, the Danons and the Unilevers of this world, starting to use it to drive and wash through the whole businesses, not just plucky little startups using it as well. That's important.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I just wondered whether you, one of the questions that came through as a result of the pandemic, whether you think we're going to see more of a shift almost to local supply and people looking more locally and that side of things.
Some, there's a reason why shirts are produced on the other side of the world. I mean, if you produce them in the UK in the conventional sense, hundreds of people sat in a big shed sewing them together, they cost 3 or 4 times as much. And as much as some people might heroically say, I'd do that, most wouldn't. If we're going to reshore an awful lot of that Far Eastern manufacture to the UK, it's going to be automated. It'll be a big factory with 3 people in it with a computer automatically 3D printing the clothing. That might be better in terms of carbon footprint of ships not coming in, but it's not really going to create much wealth, social wealth for the nation. Food's interesting. I think we could start to see a recalibration of how food is made, but do not forget, and I've seen inside the belly of the beast, the food system, how much has been set up over the last 30 or 40 years to generate big food in a big way on a global scale. To dehook ourselves from that and suddenly expect a UK farming system to provide all of it would be hard as well. But we can certainly improve the transparency. And I think a lot of the issue about localization is partly about, I want to be able to look the farmer in the eye and know that he or she is getting the money that I paid has gone to them. Partly it's just knowing that I can trust the food, it's transparent, and it doesn't feel transparent if it's 6,000 miles away. So these are the issues that wash around, but the food system in particular, we need to find a new way of producing. And a bit like my example from clothing, being 3D printed in the warehouse, what you might see is if we can't get it from the other side of the world, it doesn't come to Fred the farmer in the UK, it comes to an indoor vertical farm or it's 3D printed in a food laboratory for the future. So just be careful what you wish for there as well.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? There's a question from Diana around the emergence of green growth jobs and whether they will be intergenerational and what you think they might be as they emerge.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm a fellow of a certain age. I grew up in Bradford and Sheffield University in the middle of the miners' strike, and I saw how the right decision in terms of a macroeconomic decision for the nation was taken, that through tens of thousands of people on scrap heap just said, you're now irrelevant, world's moved on, suck it up. And I think the ability to actually reach out to communities and say, look, I know in Aberdeen you produce a lot, it was oil-based, but we're not going to throw you on the scrap heap. Actually, we need your skills to build a new hydrogen economy of the North Sea Basin, offshore wind, take people on that journey. And I think, to be fair, the Prime Minister's decarbonisation plan last week tried to do that, and a few people found it a little bit trite. I didn't. Talking about people's jobs and opportunities right away across this nation, not just London-centric, is critically important to a fair, low-carbon future. So again, jobs and how they migrate. Again, remember before COVID and before we talked about decarbonisation, we were shifting to a gig economy. We were shifting to a world where things were being outsourced. Robots were replacing people in jobs. That trend ain't going to stop. In fact, it's going to accelerate now. So what we can do to create highly skilled green jobs for the future, I think is really important. And if I picked out one disappointment from last week's 10-point plan, it was we didn't talk about retrofitting 27 million leaky British homes that leak energy every day, that hundreds of thousands of men and women could have been employed in now to correct, with great benefit to the homeowner, the person doing the work, and our carbon emissions as well. Missed opportunity.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Obviously, you've got a vast amount of retail experience. There's a few questions coming in just to dig into that a little bit more. One in particular around the idea of retail needing to be, or perhaps becoming, a genuine circular model and not just a trend. And just interested to hear your thoughts on that, how close we are, what's next.
Yeah. And I hear a lot of good talk in this. I'm seeing some great trials. You know, Waitrose has now been running trials where people are refilling containers going in for things like rice and sugar and coffee, tea in some of their shops. IKEA's got a second-hand store in Sweden. I think we're seeing a number of other trials of business trials. And in a world that's consuming trillions of items, how many usefully get back to be reused usefully rather than downcycled at best, thrown away is usually the case? Very, very few. Now, people have started to play around with rental. I think John Lewis has done some good stuff to trial rental to do with furniture. It's committed to make sure that, you know, every one of its categories in the future has take-back capability. Brilliant. I still don't think people have yet worked out how to do it. And there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done with citizens to say, this is genuinely better than just buying something for £1 and then throwing it away. And again, the reason I'm seeing disruption in the fashion industry from resale is it's giving the citizen the benefit. Rather than buy it and throw it away, buy it and then extract some secondary value so you can buy something else or have some money saved. So we have barely scratched the surface of turning into a truly circular economy. We were actually way ahead in terms of decarbonisation, of mapping out where we need to get to and how. Circularity is a long, long way from reality at this stage.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just having a bit of think about the tech side of things that you raised before. Do you think, I mean, quite a lot of the examples that you put up with tech businesses, and someone's asked whether you think that's does that give them an advantage as a tech business? Is there something like that? And also, I'm quite interested to know how, if people are going to use more tech-based solutions, how that then matches back against the need for connections, and that's how that's going to be complemented by our need for communities, etc. as well.
Yeah, so a really good question. In a sense, now we're all tech companies.
Yeah,
you know, Walmart and Tesco's had to learn to do tech to respond to Amazon. So there's pure play out there. And again, I think they've got just a digital advantage because it's built into their DNA. It's just what they do. Again, remember, Microsoft, Google, and Apple are in a bit of an existential race now to be the world's best on carbon. I quite like it, I quite enjoy it. Their physical footprint is significant in the sense they use a lot of energy in their data centers, but it's one type of energy use, and it should have one solution. You put a big wind farm next to it. You make those service centers simpler. Amazon, quite ambitious, but very ambitious as well. But it's like a retailer. It's selling 12 million different products. The embedded carbon of Amazon is not in its data centers, even though it's huge. It's in the products it sells, this scope 3 that I was talking about, and all the supply chains around the world. So in a sense, the new economy faces both new challenges, but the same old challenges as well. You know, Amazon's still selling an awful lot of stuff in the way that Marks Spencer, Tesco's, and John Lewis are. And it has to be part of these decarbonisation alliances as well. So I think I mentioned tech as a potential solution, and I'm particularly interested in terms of how it tracks and traces this point about circular economy. I've got grey hair for a reason. Yeah, I'm quite old, but I spent 20 years at M&S trying to track and trace 3 billion items that M&S sold every year with an abacus, a pen, a paper, and a spreadsheet. Impossible. If I'd had big data and AI to track and trace thousands of factories, farms, and billions of products, it would have been so much easier, and then to turn it into a circular economy. So I think tech's an incredible enabler of transparency, of circularity, and customer engagement in what's going on. Again, this point back, interested to see a number of businesses starting to come out and carbon label again. Tesco's bravely tried to do it 10 years ago, didn't work, lots of good reasons. Businesses are starting to put carbon labels on. You know, people are Allbirds, Quorn, Upfield, good. I don't think we can just slap a physical logo on hundreds of different products in people's lives. We have to do something digital, something smart that allows you to preload into your phone an app that rapidly scans my basket, decides whether it's high carbon or not, gives me alternatives to the high carbon option with a low carbon option. We have to use technology to do that.
Really interesting. Well, just almost rolling back a tiny bit. If you, it sounds like you had an incredible senior leadership team that you were working with M&S. You were doing really brave stuff, and you were taking them on the journey, but they were supportive with it. If we've got people listening here who perhaps need to encourage their senior leadership team to take action, what are the your top 3 starting points of how we can help people to turn these opportunities into reality?
The most important thing I ever did at M&S was sit down with the M&S food division before we launched Plan A and just benchmark where we were, all the key social environmental issues of 2006 against competition. Sainsbury's, Coke, Waitrose, Tesco's, incredibly good businesses. And we'd say, fish, are we minimum standards, average or leading? Oh, we're average. Does that matter? Yeah, it does. Sainsbury's, Waitrose ahead of us. Fish is a real issue. Sustainability is an issue that customers really understand. We really need to be catch up with them. Right. How do we catch up? Right. We'll do A, B, C, D, E to get ahead of them. Having that competitor reference set is the single most important thing anybody can do in a business. The second thing is I threw lots of insight into here about policy system and investors and regulation and reporting. Your job doing, in effect, my role in any business is to triangulate all that into one simple, compelling deck that business can understand, rather than just say, read this 200-page report about COP26 and another 200 pages about TCFD. Your job is to bring it all together, translate it into something coherent for the organization. And the third thing you've got to do, and this was a bit of learning of mine. I used to sort of trawl around the business just after we launched Plan A. Stuart Rose behind me saying, backing Mike, and I'd go and see a director and said, we've got to do this. And they'd say, Mike, Stuart's asked me to do 36 things before you turn up with 37. And I had to learn very humbly to get alongside each of the leaders and say, what's your personal business plan for this? For a few of them, it was very emotional. Kids, I care like you, Mike, I care as much as you, even though I've got a different job description. For others, it was, oh, Mike, my cost base is going up. Right, I'll use Plan A to drive my cost base down. Mike, I'm losing my point of difference with Waitrose. Right, I'll use Plan A to drive a point of difference. Somebody else would say morale's down in my northern shops. Right, I'll use Plan A to drive motivation in our northern shops. So you're using Plan A both as a long-term strategic tool, but a short-term tactical tool as well. And that's very important.
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you. Is there anything we hear quite a lot about big businesses teaching small businesses? Is there anything vice versa? What about small businesses teaching big businesses?
Oh goodness! I mean, I had that slide up of all the small businesses that become quite large business on the back of sustainability. Tesla was once tiny, Oatly was once tiny, Modern Meadow was once tiny. So all around us, hundreds of innovators are now looking at what truly sustainable business looks like. Many will fail, that's the nature of innovation, but some will grow to be much bigger than you. Do you want to buy them before they go past you? Do you want to respond to them? So my learning is twofold in terms of small businesses. One is just the source of the next economy. The second bit is just intelligence. So if I looked at the M&S supply chain, and it was the same with M&S stores, people working in stores, constantly coming back to you and saying, Mike, I know you're pontificating about all this good green stuff in the center of the business, and it's all the right words are written down. But the reality for me, how your team buys from me is not that. And this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And you go and put it right. So I think you just constantly, humbly listen to the economy. And I think I see some good initiatives starting to emerge now amongst big businesses. Again, I talked about Walmart and Project Teraton. It's not just about working with the big suppliers, P&G, Henkel, Unilever, etc., Mars, Coke. It's about working with lots of small producers as well and giving them the tools and the support they need to prosper going forward. So small business is an incredible source of information, and we'll come past you one day if you stand still.
Absolutely. Marta's just asked a question around the financial side of things, and I think how can we change enterprises who are expecting to see financial returns from their sustainability investments, and what this expectation of return should be, perhaps. And I think the money side, as you pointed out earlier, is changing very rapidly, isn't it, in terms of ESG and those linking together. In the old paradigm, it was a question of classical eco-efficiency business case. So we'd take 20 odd million out of the M&S electricity bill, and some of that would have to go over the fence to pay for my slightly more sustainable cotton. That cost me a bit more. At the end of the day, I'd net it out and say, save X, cost me Y, net benefit over 10 years to M&S, 750 million quid. That was great. That was the old paradigm. Now my business case is very much more sophisticated in the sense it's the cost of my capital. So if I want to secure finance to grow in the future or survive in the future, I need to deliver my ESG credentials. That's becoming ever more important. Customer. So if I want to secure my customer base in the future, I've got to be selling things they actually want. If I'm a meat-based business now just selling meat, and I'm not preparing for a plant alternative, and I'm not preparing for what might lie ahead of that, I'm probably out of business as well. And then the third thing is resilience.
And again, I've studied those M&S supply chains around the world. A great little story from East Anglia, 2018, middle of a crippling drought in the middle of the UK. 10 years before, a lot of M&S farmers had invested in winter water storage on the back of Plan A, had stored all the winter water, took them through a very dry British summer, kept the quality requirements going, the cost requirements going, the availability requirements going, when a lot of other people were having to source from around the world in emergency fashion. So building resilience into supply chains. So I think the business case has become tremendously more sophisticated now in terms of how we do things.
Excellent, thank you. So I know my time's really up. Just to finish with one final question, a lot in there. What are the sort of things you're particularly excited about for next year? Just to finish this off on.
I'm happy because we've reached that tipping point now where we're shifting from less bad business, but it was still business as we knew it, flogging as much stuff as we could in a profligate, unsustainable way, to this point where new sustainable business models are starting to truly disrupt businesses. And if you don't respond to them, again, it's not a bad day on the front page of The Guardian that lies ahead of you. It's commercial oblivion. That's what excites me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. A really fact-packed and very inspiring talk, and matters to think about for everyone. I will hand back to Tiffany, but thanks so much, Mike, for your time and all your insights.
Pleasure, and thank you, Amanda, for leading the conversation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you both very much. That was really, really interesting. You packed a lot into that hour. We could have gone on for a lot longer there, but thank you both. And thanks to everyone who joined us today, whether that's here on Zoom or through YouTube or other social media channels. Great to have you all with us. As I mentioned before, the Green Recovery Festival will continue throughout this week. We have lots of other really interesting sessions coming up. If anyone's interested in getting involved in the crowd and hearing what we have planned coming up in 2021, including our COP26 activities, please do get in touch with myself or a colleague at the crowd. And a big thank you to Mike and Amanda and for everyone for joining us today. And in the words of Mike Barry, be resilient, be bold and be brave. Thank you all.